What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to another video. So Texas has recently been through some really crazy weather, but we made it through safely, thankfully, and we're happy to be back in the studio because today we are talking about this beast of a smartphone, the Galaxy S21 Ultra. Now, the S21 Ultra is the third Ultra phone released by Samsung in a little over a year. And it's been really interesting to see the way Samsung has made small refinements to the Ultra lineup, which has ultimately led to this phone, which is a beast in practically every single smartphone category. So let's take a deeper look into the S21 Ultra and find out what makes it such an awesome smartphone. Now, the Ultra is the top of the line smartphone choice in the S21 product lineup, which means that it keeps the new design language that Samsung introduced. And I'm a huge fan of the design language. So frosted glass back with a camera module that essentially blends into the enclosure of the phone. Now, on the S21 and the S21 Plus, I feel like Samsung did a really good job of seamlessly blending that camera module into the enclosure without it being too obtrusive. But how do I put this lightly with the Ultra? This phone is thick, okay? So the camera module on this phone is much thicker, which means the two sides that wrap around for the enclosure are also very thick. And it's incredibly noticeable depending on which angle you're looking at the phone at, and also whenever you're holding the phone, especially if you manage to have, let's say, an S21 in one hand and the S21 Ultra in the other. This phone is significantly heavier and significantly thicker than the other two phones in the lineup. Now, it does come with some pros though. Obviously, the camera system on the Ultra is just an absolute monster, which is going to take up some size. And the phone is also housing a 5,000 milliamp hour battery. So at least in this case, the thickness of the phone is definitely justified. I'm also a huge fan of the phantom black color that the S21 Ultra comes in. You can never go wrong with frosted matte glass that also does a good job of not picking up fingerprints, and a matte camera enclosure. The S21 Ultra in the phantom black color is actually incredibly striking considering it's rocking a color that is not really meant to stand out. And honestly, I think if MKBHD has taught us anything in his illustrious YouTube career, it's that we should be making everything matte black. Now, Samsung is also incredibly proud of the phantom black color on the S21 Ultra, so much so that they actually put together a video of how they achieve this color.
Our obsession remains to continuously simplify and improve.
No, that's the wrong video.
For designers, black is the most difficult color to create.
There it is. So yeah, needless to say, the phantom black color on the S21 Ultra is easily one of the best things about it, and even then, it's just the color. The Ultra is rocking a pretty large 6.8-inch display, and again, there's really no shock here, but the display on the Ultra is one of the best, if not arguably the best panel on a smartphone in 2021. I know, big shock there, right? Samsung never fails to make an amazing smartphone display that you can basically just stay at your home screen and just stare at the display and marvel at how much quality it happens to have. Now, Samsung did make some changes to the Ultra's particular display in order to differentiate it from the lineup. First of all, the Ultra's display is slightly curved at the end, which is different from the S21 and the S21 Plus, which come with flat displays. Now, it's not as curved as the S20 Ultra or the Note 20 Ultra, which is actually nice. I found that having a slightly less degree of curve at the end of the display actually does help with not accidentally touching the edges of the display with your palms more often. And my favorite change to the display is that it comes at a maximum resolution of Quad HD Plus, and you can have the 120 Hz refresh rate at the same time. So you have maximum display resolution and maximum display refresh rate, which I believe is the first time we've seen this on a Samsung smartphone. So kudos to Samsung for finally getting this part of the display right. The S21 Ultra's display is an absolute monster. I don't want to spend too much time talking about performance and software because in my opinion, the big picture, no pun intended on that one, is with the camera system on the S21 Ultra. And we also spent a good amount of time outlining overall performance and how great One UI 3 actually is in our Galaxy S21 Plus review. But just a quick general overview of what's inside the S21 Ultra. You're looking at the Snapdragon 888 processor and 12 gigabytes of RAM. And at the base model that I have right here, it comes with 128 gigabytes of internal storage. So the main difference between buying a S21 or an S21 Plus versus the Ultra is 4 extra gigabytes of RAM, which is going to be great for those of you who like to keep a lot of apps open in the background or rely heavily on multitasking throughout the day. Now, even though this is the Ultra model, there is still no micro SD card expansion support. So if you're going to be someone who is going to be taking a lot of high resolution photos and videos, make sure you're going for those higher storage options because you cannot expand it on this lineup anymore. All right, now let's talk about what I feel like everyone is thinking about whenever they look at this smartphone, and that's the camera system. Now, there is a lot to talk about whenever it comes to the back camera setup. So let's talk about the front camera first. It's a 40 megapixel selfie camera, and I'm gonna be honest with you guys, and I've mentioned this in previous reviews as well, I don't really use the selfie camera at all on basically any phone that I review. The only time I'll use a front-facing camera system is if that front-facing camera system can unlock the phone, which is obviously possible on this device too, but I use the fingerprint sensor. Needless to say, I just took a selfie here in the studio while we're recording this review, and the selfie camera quality is actually really, really nice. And I took this selfie in portrait as well, so you guys can take a look at how the phone's artificial intelligence processes something like a selfie portrait picture. And I'm actually really impressed. It's pretty nice. So for those of you out there who like to take selfies, you will definitely appreciate the 40 megapixel camera. Where I will say Samsung made the most impressive change is actually in the selfie color tone. You can now choose between a natural color tone or a bright color tone, which I feel like on a lot of other smartphones, the default option is just bright, because when you take a selfie, you're probably trying to capture as much light as possible. So to have the option to switch back and forth to something that's a little more natural is really nice to see on a front-facing camera. Now, let's talk about the rear camera setup. Let's get the specs of all these lenses out of the way because, like I mentioned, there is a lot going on here. So you have a 12 megapixel ultra wide angle lens, you have a massive 108 megapixel wide angle lens, and you have two 10 megapixel telephoto lenses. Now, one other addition is a laser autofocus module, and we'll get to why that's an important addition here in a minute. But what I want to start by saying about this camera system is that I wasn't necessarily worried about whether or not it would produce great results, because honestly, last year's S20 Ultra produced great results. What I was more interested in seeing was how Samsung would refine certain elements of last year's camera system and also improve certain elements of last year's camera system. So let's talk about refinements for a second. Specifically in portrait mode, I actually really enjoy the way the S21 Ultra handles subjects in portrait mode now. I think they've made expansions and additions to the way their artificial intelligence handles image processing, and I'm actually really pleased to see the way that it can now properly differentiate between a subject and the background and apply the bokeh effect, and also give you the option to flexibly adjust how much you want the background to be blurred. Now back to that laser autofocus module, because this is another refinement to the camera system. It helps tremendously with focusing on subjects. If you guys remember watching last year's review on the S20 Ultra, I mentioned that that particular phone has a problem focusing on subjects, especially whenever you were in the 108 megapixel mode. I found that a lot of times whenever I was focusing on a subject, it would only partially focus on certain parts of the subject, and other parts of the subject itself were actually blurred out. Now, to kind of show you guys what I mean and how this camera has improved, I took some photos of some Dragon Ball figurines that I have in my house. I know I'm kind of a nerd, but here's what I'm trying to show you. I've got certain figures in the front and certain figures in the back on these photos. And if you've noticed, all I had to do was tap to focus on one in the front, and it immediately blurred the subject in the back. Or I could tap to focus on a subject in the back, and it immediately blurred the subject in the front. I don't think this was something I could have pulled off confidently with the S20 Ultra, and I'm willing to bet it's because of that laser autofocus module that helps this system focus more, especially whenever you're trying to capture those super detailed shots in full 108 megapixels. Now, let's talk about those two 10 megapixel telephoto lenses, because those two lenses are going to work simultaneously to improve the massive amount of zoom capability that this camera system has. If you guys remember, last year with the S20 Ultra, Samsung introduced the 100 times space zoom, which at the time I kind of felt like it was kind of a gimmick. I still to this day can't think of a use case scenario for 100 times space zoom, but the addition of 2 lenses that simultaneously work together for zoom has actually improved the quality of photos that you can get. And I took a pretty awesome example. So here's a photo of me standing on a service road next to a highway. So this is a service road, and then in front of the service road is one lane of a highway going in one direction. After that is another lane of a highway going in another direction. After that is another service road, and after that is a parking lot, and after that is a Chevy dealership. So the first photo that you're looking at is in standard wide angle. The next photo that you're looking at is in 10 times zoom. And the next photo that you're looking at is in 30 times zoom. It looks significantly better than anything last year's S20 Ultra would have produced, in my opinion. And again, I did not have to even use 100 times zoom to come up with a photo like this. Whereas last year's models were producing photos that kind of resembled watercolor paintings, this year's S21 Ultra is producing photos that are more usable in my opinion. They still may not be the most detailed at 30 times or 100 times, but they're definitely more usable than the last generation, which is just awesome to see. In terms of video capability, you're still dealing with 1080p, 30 and 60, 4K, 30 and 60, and 8K at 24 frames per second. I would again say that the sweet spot is 4K 60. All of the video clips that I've taken for the sake of this review have been in 4K 60, and I absolutely love the camera performance. So refinements and improvements all around that lead to a fantastic overall rear camera system that's incredibly flexible in a variety of shooting opportunities. It's a dope camera setup. So I've been thoroughly impressed using the Galaxy S21 Ultra, and another positive note about this particular phone is that it starts off $200 cheaper than the S20 that launched last year. So the S20 last year launched at a starting price of $1,399, which was absolutely ridiculous, right? I mean, these phones define a new echelon of the ultra premium smartphone market, where there's premium at like $800 to $900 or $1,000, and then there's ultra premium that are $300 to $400 more expensive. But the S21 Ultra actually starts at $1,199, so $200 cheaper, and places like Amazon are already selling this phone brand new for $1,000. Now, at the time of making this video, they're sold out, which makes sense. It should be an incredibly popular phone. It's awesome. But needless to say, I'm actually happy with the fact that Samsung basically improved this phone in every single way over last year's model and still found a way to make it $200 cheaper. And they're definitely marketing these phones towards their power users and even the types of users that they've typically reserved phones like the Galaxy Note for. I mean, Samsung went so far this year as to make an S Pen accessory for the Galaxy S21 Ultra. Now, there are a couple things to keep in mind with that particular S Pen. It's external, it doesn't fit in the phone. If you want to have it with the phone all the time, you have to buy a case. So it's not as full-featured as the S Pen you'll find on the Note, but either way, it shows that Samsung definitely has big hopes and plans for these Ultra lineup of smartphones, and they're really trying to target their power user customer base. Now, overall, like I said, super impressive, and it's cheaper than last year's model, and it's refined in practically every single way. So if you're on the market for a brand new Android smartphone and you just happen to be a fan of Samsung phones, you should definitely consider the Galaxy S21 Ultra, especially if you were the type of person who may have held off on last year's S20 lineup because you wanted to see improvements to that particular lineup first. But either way, I want to thank you guys again for stopping by and watching another video. If you enjoyed the content, make sure you hit subscribe, especially if you're new to the channel. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please stay safe out there, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace. As well, I don't really use selfie cameras. I did take one photo just now as we were recording this. Cut it.